Today we celebrate the Feast of the Holy Family, which is, of course, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And you say, well, Father, that's kind of a tough act to follow. You know, Jesus is the Savior of the world. Mary is the Immaculate Conception. She's without sin. And then Joseph is the highest male saint in heaven. And so, tough act to follow. But, you know, it's good that we have high standards to challenge us and to follow so that we do better. Now, unfortunately for us, this is probably the most difficult time in history to raise children because the world is so much with us. There's so much anti-gospel temptations and propaganda, so many things, you know. The culture changed really right around the time I was being born in the early 60s. That woman went to the Supreme Court and got prayer out of public schools. Well, we all know how the public schools are. It didn't take long after they kicked God out, the devil showed up and said, hey, okay, I'm glad there's a vacancy. I'll be happy to fill it. So now we have school shootings and all kinds of horrible things going on. And the Blessed Mother talked about many fashions will be introduced. This is in 1917 that would offend God greatly. So what are the fashions? Well, immodest dress. People don't even know what that is anymore. It's basically showing a whole lot more real estate than you should be. And so it's so bad, though. I mean, so you might have, in America, we have maybe a girl in a bikini advertising Coppertone on a billboard. Well, in Europe, there's a girl on the billboard, but she doesn't even have a bikini. So the problem is a lot of the trash that's in Europe and a lot of the garbage that starts in California, it works its way, you know, across the Atlantic from Europe to the East Coast, and then the bad stuff from the West Coast comes over to the East Coast. It's just, you know, so there's so many challenges. You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, we had a 19-inch black and white Zenith, and one TV with the rabbit ears, and we got a few channels from New York, WOR or whatever it was, you know, and my happiness lied in watching Marine Boy, Speed Racer, Bugs Bunny, and Star Trek, and that was it. You know, that was it for electronic stuff. So today, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I thought about it, and one of the basic problems with the kids today is that a lot of them don't believe, or they believe in God in the background. So God, you know, God's there, he's doing his thing, and I'm here doing my thing. I don't bother him, he doesn't bother me. You know, ridiculous thought. You know, and then the thought of the people that want to fight against the church. They want to shut the church down. They want to change the culture of the world. You know, you're going to fight against God. Now, think about how dumb that is. Whatever power you have comes from God. God is the source of all life, all power, all knowledge. And so it'd be sort of like I come into my room and my computer says, I'm going to get you. And I say, oh, yeah? I walk over to where it's plugged in the wall and pull the plug out. And I say, how about now? Well, I mean, how can you fight against God when all of the power you have is dependent upon him as a source and continued permission? So the people that want to fight against God, they're not thinking too clear, to say the least. So now, again, as I've mentioned before, PragerU has wonderful videos. If you type in Prager University or PragerU and you go to Proofs for the Existence of God, they've got some really great stuff, even for adults to watch, you know. And it's short, it's not like 5 minutes long, and you got some nice graphics, and there's a whole bunch of stuff regarding God and issues that he has made available. I remember I did get a hold of him one time. I talked to him on the phone. He was on a show, and I was trying to tell him that I think he should take that stuff that has to do with the basic philosophical and religious questions, the big ones and foundations, and make a book out of it with pictures and everything. And he said we're working on it. If you see it, let me know. I'd like to buy it. But anyway, so the reality is God should never be in the background. He should be in the foreground, face to face, every day, everywhere, every part of your life. He should be a major influencer, a major changer in your life, so that you're constantly doing your best to improve and change, to bring your will to conform to his will. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. But the world, as I said, weighs upon us. Immodest dress, impurity on the internet. I mean, you can't even walk through Walmart's register without being surrounded by immodest dress on the magazines. I can't imagine them allowing that in the 50s. So the culture used to support these things. Now we have, I call it the false gospel of M&P. So it's money, pleasure, and power. So what is the power? The power has to do with pride, So power, most of us aren't powerful politicians or rich people that can influence politics and judges and things, but we all have our own little pride and ego. Maybe we can manipulate people in a way that we shouldn't. Maybe we can use our intelligence and our pride and our little bit of power to kind of do things that aren't really servicing the kingdom, but are servicing our purposes and ego. We need to be careful about that. And pleasure. Pleasure is a constant temptation. There's certain pleasures we're allowed to have. I can eat Belgian chocolate and I never confess it. Happy to do it. Now, but there's other things that are against the commandments that you got to confess, that you don't want to do, that could separate you from God's kingdom forever. And that is the biggest tragedy that life could ever have, to be separated from God forever. And so that's why it's so important here and now to be united with God every day. I have this little thing I jokingly call the walking Hail Mary. You get to Walmart, you park the car, walking into the entrance. Now I can do this more because maybe you're not alone when you go to Walmart. I don't know. I'm alone pretty much everywhere I go, but I'm not really alone because I have my guardian angel with me. I like to think about my favorite saints. And I'm also know that I'm in the presence of God. If we feel lonely, it's because we haven't been praying enough and our faith is weak and we are not sufficiently aware of the presence of God, which is there whether we feel it or not, whether we believe it or not. God is always there because we're here. And if God didn't give us existence, we wouldn't have it. We're not self-creating beings. Only God is. God is totally independent. We are totally dependent on God for everything, every aspect. So you could probably get 2 or 3 Hail Marys in between your car and the front of Walmart. And you can squeeze it in other places, And sometimes I try to park farther away. Ever since this idiot ran my car with a carriage when I was in the store, I came back and I had a dent in my wheel well and there's a carriage there. So parking a little farther, you get a few more steps. It's good for you. Walking's a good exercise. So, and plus you get a little more time to pray. So we should constantly be at prayer to grow in our faith and grace in the presence of God, because there's forces at work to pull us away from God, away from faith in God, away from the church, the sacrament, away from prayer, away from the commandments. It is a constant struggle because we have a thing called concupiscence. When Adam and Eve sinned, we got a weakened will and a darkened intellect. So the weakened will means it's easy to do sinful and selfish things, and it's hard to do good things, to keep the commandment. And so one of the things that we want to counter the false gospel of money and power and pleasure is to have the true gospel. And one of the big things is sacrificial love of God and neighbor, of which Jesus is, of course, the primary example. So the sacrificial love of God and neighbor, it means that when we go to love God as he has asked us to do in the 10 Commandments and the 14 works of mercy, and our neighbor, there's going to be some sacrifice. Sacrifice maybe of pride a little bit, and an engaging in humility. Maybe of not getting, whatever kind of money or pleasure or power we might want in the world, We need to sacrifice here and now. This is the opportunity. Because once we go to heaven, well, then we're set. And if we haven't sacrificed sufficiently for the love of God and neighbor, well, we get stop off for our purgatory and fix that account, balance it out. So, keeping the gospel alive, the true gospel, keeping Christ in our hearts through prayer. There's so many spots throughout the day, idle times, that can be sanctified. God's going to show me and you. She's going to show me how many more prayers I could have said with idle time I had that could have easily been sanctified. Unfortunately, I don't sleep too good at night. I often wake up, and so, I try to do some prayers. Sometimes I get a little snack. I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to drink a little apple cider at night. I just warm it up in a cup in the microwave and get some hot apple cider and try to go back to bed and avoid, eating too much stuff, because it's not good to have. You want to have an empty stomach to sleep, but it doesn't always work out that good. I lay down and my stomach's, the little hungries are in there going around biting your stomach. I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. So you got to feed them a little bit and shut them up so they can go back to sleep. So I'm sure that's not very medically accurate, but it's just just my own little version. So when I grew up, well, Father, what did your parents do to deal with you? Oh, I was quite something to deal with, but fortunately, Dad was one tough Irishman. World War II vet. You didn't mess with Dad. Oh no, death, instantly. So, fortunately, when he did come to get me, I could run faster, and I would get away most of the time. This couple of times he got a hold of me before I started running because he knew, and it was not a happy moment. But Mom was so perfect. Mom was a saint. She loved me. I was her pride and joy. I was her baby. I was the youngest. And so Mom would intervene, get in between me and Dad, save me from destruction. So prayer, prayer is an interesting thing. So I'm going to start at the beginning, and I mean the beginning. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my life here. So I think I have two brothers who are with the Lord because Mom had two miscarriages, and my dad said they were far enough along. He could tell they were boys. He had to bury them in the backyard under the pine tree next to the Blessed Mother statue. It was a sad thing. So as a result of that, they prayed the rosary for me. Well, not for me exactly, but so they prayed the rosary. He said, I felt God was sending us a soul, and I wanted to make sure she'd be. So they prayed the rosary that they would have a child and he would be okay. That there wouldn't be a miscarriage. They weren't asking for a priest, but God, a lot of times when you pray for something, you say, Lord, I want this, and he says, okay, I can give you that, but then he puts a little heavenly tax on there. It's like, okay, I want you to do something for me. So maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But in any event, so in answer to their prayer, I was born on my mother's birthday that year, and I weighed over 10 pounds, and she said I was the hardest delivery she had. So, anyway, I'm still here, and I do weigh more than 10 pounds now. So later on, I grew up, kid in Jersey, getting into trouble, whatever. The usual suspects, the usual things. And then when I was 14, I started doing a little soul searching. I think, when you're a preteen or around that time, you start to think about some deeper things. Is there a God? Do I want to pray? Do I want to go to church? Do I want to answer, So you start to, as a child, and you're moving into adulthood spiritually, and you start to say, well, I'm going to make this my own. I'm going to church with my parents because I want to be there. I want to be with God. Or you start to rebel and annoy your poor parents, and I don't want to go to church. Father's boring. He never shuts up. Whatever. So the thing is, I was searching, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, when I look at a beautiful sunset, I know there's got to be a God there, because it's too complex, it's too beautiful to be a random accident, as some people like to say. There's got to be a God. And I thought, well, logically, if God's there, then I need to get to know him. And I was trying to figure out how. So my dad picked up on this, and he gave me a Bible for Christmas. That was the most significant year of my life, 1977. It was a good year. And then he later on gave me a miraculous medal, which led me to the rosary, and I started to pray the rosary. And then the Blessed Mother was praying for me and with me, and she helped me out. And she helped give me insight that the prayer was bringing me peace in my life. And then, that's why I'm here today. I don't know where I would have went without the Blessed Mother and her kindness and love and prayers, and my mother as well, working with her. So my mother's a very saintly woman. I said if I ever got made Pope, I'd canonize her in the first couple of weeks of my papacy, and she'd be declared a saint, because she's answered so many prayers for me, and as she was dying, she even told me that. She said, don't forget about me. I'm going to be praying for you. I love you. Ask me for prayers and I'll help you. Boy, she's helped. It's amazing. I've never asked my mother to pray for something that hasn't been granted. So, that's why you guys got to realize it's so important to love your mom, My dad was so funny. I'd be giving my mother a hard time, and he would yell at me, "Don't you dare give your mother a hard time. She changed your diapers. She kept you clean. She took care of you," although he said it in a slightly more colorful way, the way a true New Yorker would. I can't say that from the pulpit, but anyway, he made his point that Mom gave me a lot of love before I even knew what it was. So it's important for us as we go to the Feast of Holy Family to honor our father and mother. And yeah, they can make mistakes. They're not perfect. But you know what? We all make mistakes. So we need to try to meet our parents halfway. So the job of the family, okay? Husbands and wives should pray for one another and with one another and for their children. And when the children get older, I remember praying, I didn't pray too much for Mom because I figured if she didn't make it to heaven, we're all toast. But anyway, I did pray for my dad. And I had a whole novena to Our Lady of the Miraculous Smell. I prayed every day till the day he died. So it's important for children to pray for their parents as well. Now, one of the things that we had, I'm a firm believer in sacramentals, and they helped me a lot. At the top of the stairs in my house was a beautiful picture of a very manly Jesus with the Sacred Heart. And I say that because a lot of them that are very effeminate, strange-looking images that I don't like. But anyway, so this is a very manly image of Christ smiling with the Sacred Heart. And no one ever even told me about it. I just looked at it and I thought, well, that means he loves me, right? So I would look at it. It was the top of, I used to look at it all the time, and I think it had a very positive influence. We had another beautiful oil painting of the Agony in the Garden. Over the entrance to the kitchen was a Last Supper, a beautiful painting of Last Supper. We had, statues and crucifixes around in there. And they're in the background, but they're good, subtle faith builders for children. You want to have, if you want to have your home should be like a domestic church. You should have a crucifix in there, an image of the Blessed Mother, maybe a couple of saints, maybe the ones connected, patron saints. But it's good to have a wholesome environment, a spiritual environment, so that just as the Holy Family was holy, your family is holy. Holy has to do with being dedicated and connected to God. So you don't want to have an unholy family, where you're separated from God. No one gets baptized, no one goes to church, no one prays. The images on the wall are often of secular things and sometimes of sinful things. My roommate in the Air Force had pictures of these women on motorcycles and various things, and we got into an argument. And so we wound up making an agreement that he would take his stuff down and I took mine down. So I took all my religious pictures down, he took all his very bad secular pictures down, and so we had blank walls and happiness. What can I tell you? It's a compromise, but it worked. When you're in the military, oftentimes you have a roommate. So we as parents, you want to try to emulate the Holy Family to the extent you can in the modern world of technology with all of its challenges. Again, there's so many things outside of the church walls, coming at you. I don't know that kids, in my opinion, I don't know about having cell phones, but there's arguments both ways. But even, I think a preteen shouldn't have a cell phone. And golly knows what the kids share with one another in school, especially the public schools, about what's on the phone. And never mind having a computer. I think the computer should be in a public place in the house so the kid's not alone with the computer in their bedroom. That's just my opinion. So you want to make an environment that is conducive to virtue, holiness, and ultimately salvation. And so one of the things that I did have with my parents, even though they didn't talk to me too much about God, my mom did read to me from the Bible when I was a little guy. I don't know, 4 or 5. I know I couldn't read yet, so I was excited about it. And it was nice to have Mom come in and see me every night before I went to bed. And she'd sit on the bed, and I'd look at the pictures in the children's Bible, and she'd read to me. I think that boosted my faith. But the example of my parents, we always prayed grace before meals. We always went to church. And so grace before meals, I have a small recommendation for you. Instead of doing the little prayer that's written by some Monsignor, God knows when, bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, why don't you pray either an Our Father or a Hail Mary or both, thank God for the food together. Imagine that, the whole family sitting around the table, and you pray the Our Father and the Hail Mary in thanksgiving for the food. Comes out the same. You're thanking God for the food. And if you do that every day for a year, you prayed over 7 rosaries materially in terms of the number of Our Fathers and Hail Marys. So that's quite a boost. I know it's hard to pray the rosary together as a family. I had a family, friends of mine, I'm still friends with them. They got 13 kids. And I asked her how she did it. And both her and her husband are triathlon athletes. They're very healthy. And so she said, well, I concentrate on the ones that are learning how to read, homeschoolers, and then I pair them with an older child. So a younger boy is going to be paired with an older boy who's going to help them with school and teaching and learning. And so 13 kids, that's pretty good, managing that. And they were all very happy. But I remember watching the rosary. I was at the house one time for lunch, and they were doing the rosary, and it was pandemonium. Boy, one in the corner crying and screaming about something. They just kept praying the rosary, and she'd go around and she'd help the kid, whatever, and the husband. And so the two of them would, they'd work their way through the rosary regardless of what speed bumps were in the way, So the family that prays together stays together. The power of the rosary should never be underestimated. So again, the smallest thing is an Our Father and a Hail Mary at Grace Before Meals. I mean, that's about as wimpy as it gets, okay? You can manage that. You can squeeze that out. Even if you're intimidated by doing a decade a day as a family or the 5 decades, So you want to have the Blessed Mother, part of the Holy Family, praying for you and with you. You want to have the presence of Christ, because whenever you have Mary, you have Jesus. You want to have the presence of Christ, pictures of Jesus, on the wall, Sacred Heart, crucifix, things like that. So as we celebrate the Holy Family on New Year's Eve, perhaps we could try to do a few new things to make our Holy Families even holier.